Guess who's back? Hello, hello. I know it's been a while since I posted, like a long time, like, I don't know, maybe close to a year. I haven't checked. And I'm sorry about that absence. An avid YouTuber, I am not. And you know, like all things, once you start conversations, you get some heat and you get some hate and it just kind of hit a point that I was like, I don't have room for this kind of negativity in my life right now. But I did have enough people reach out that maybe don't live in an area that these conversations are accessible and available and there for them if they want them. And so I had enough requests that I thought I might put something out. And I also had an idea for a topic that's kind of timely and might be helpful. It actually came at the request of a couple different police officers from session. They're like, can you do a video about this? I think it would be helpful. So the topic is this: as we're coming out of this very social holiday season, I thought it might be helpful to discuss social patterns and norms within the law enforcement community. Now, like all things, we're discussing law of averages, right? And so there are going to be exceptions to every rule. But in general, what we tend to see is the longer someone is in law enforcement, the more introverted they become, or they tend towards introverted social patterns and behaviors. And this can be hard for everyone. It can be hard for the spouse, it can be hard for the cop, it can be hard for the family as they feel like the officer is withdrawing and showing less energy and interest in what used to be normal engagement patterns, and maybe an increase of investment in smaller, more exclusive circles and social situations that usually involve other law enforcement. So I want to just kind of talk about introverted versus extroverted and some general misunderstandings there, what they really mean and what needs they indicate, and then offer maybe a couple strategies that might help bring more balance to relationships with those in law enforcement. So the first thing to understand is introverted does not mean antisocial. Introverted doesn't mean shy. Introverted doesn't mean they don't like people. That's not what it means. When you are more socially introverted, what that means is that when you are with people, no matter how much you like them or how much you are enjoying your time, it drains you. Like it energetically and emotionally and mentally drains you. Now, you might be enjoying it the entire time, but afterwards, there's a recovery period that needs to happen because you're introverted. So in the most basic terms, introverts charge when they are alone and drain when they are with people, and extroverts are in general the opposite. So they charge when they're with people and drain when they are alone. I am introverted myself, and it took me a while to really understand the extroverted personality because I, like most people, just thought that meant they were social, they enjoyed being with people, they liked to be outgoing, and they like spending time with people. What I didn't understand until I had an extroverted daughter is that my teenage daughter, when she has to spend, let's say, 4 days alone without a lot of social interaction, she feels as drained and depleted and crappy as I feel if I have to be with people 4 days in a row and have no time to myself. So I'm not talking like work interactions or whatever. I'm talking I am forced to be in a group of people from the time I get up to the time I go to bed for 4 days in a row. I would be like in a hospital. So I understand how draining that would be, and it took me a minute to cross apply. That's how she feels when she doesn't have social stimulus to recharge her batteries for several days in a row. So it just depends on what is draining us. And there are a lot of reasons that the longer you're in law enforcement, the more social interactions drain you. One of the things, just one piece of that puzzle, is the hypervigilance aspect of law enforcement. So even when an officer doesn't feel tense, doesn't feel like they're on guard, doesn't feel like they're watching for anything, their brain after a certain amount of time is so conditioned to take in so much information in every environment they're in on a subconscious level that they're not always aware how fast their brain is going and what details they're taking in from even a casual environment. Things that my brain, for example, has already deemed unimportant, and so it will skip over it because the brain is efficient if nothing else. And so it will decide, pay attention to this, don't pay attention to that, based on exposure and history and mostly those things. Some other ways that we gain an understanding of what do we need to make note of and what do we not in terms of safety and survival and quality of life. And so the law enforcement conditioned brain is always taking in so much information and taking even subconscious note of details that other brains are not, that it takes a lot more mental presence and energy just to be with anybody, right? And so that makes it more exhausting or more draining to be with people, even if they like people, even if they would articulate, yes, I feel safe in this environment, I don't feel stressed, I don't feel on guard, I don't feel whatever. That doesn't change what's happening in the midbrain area, or what we call the subconscious. So part of it is just the pace at which the brain is bringing in information after being in law enforcement for a while versus before being in law enforcement. So that's one of the reasons that they tend to become more introverted. There are a lot of other reasons, including just general fatigue. They're with people all day, every day, and their job is to solve those people's problems. They are required to be incredibly verbal in their job most of the time, both with each other and with the public that they serve. And they're all on video now all the time. That's incredibly stressful. I get weirded out if I know there's a camera in the room, which I understand the irony because I'm speaking to a camera right now. I get that, but I get to turn this one off whenever I want. And so to be that, it's, you know, the goldfish bowl effect, like to be that watched and that observed and everything's reviewed and you need to perform at a certain level, you need to act a certain way. It's just a lot of pressure. And so the brain starts to associate people with pressure. And so then there's this automatic resistance towards it. This is not the same thing as not enjoying people. It's not the same thing as not wanting to be there. It's just a rate of depletion and a source of depletion. So isolation can be a source of depletion, particularly for someone who is naturally more extroverted, and being around people charges them, it uplifts them, it stimulates the brain, they like how it feels. Most of the time, an introvert and extrovert end up marrying each other. And so one person needs time alone to recharge and the other person needs people to recharge. And so finding that middle ground can be really tricky. I do think that the first step is understanding what it means to be an extrovert and what it means to be an introvert. And being an extrovert doesn't mean you can't be alone. It doesn't mean you're afraid of being alone. It doesn't mean you don't have any self-esteem and you constantly need the validation of other people. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means that your battery's charged when you're with people. And an introvert does not hate people. It means their batteries drain when they're with people and it charges when they're alone. So the common ground here is we all know what it is to drain. We know what that feels like. Now, taken to extremes, an extrovert will still drain if they are in social situations like an enormously disproportionate amount, and an introvert will drain if they're completely isolated. So law of averages again. So as you're trying to navigate this, either within yourself or with your partner or with a family member, understanding that you know what it is to drain and to deeply need the charge. So coming from that place of empathy, which I know that's kind of an overused word and it can bring up different responses in different people, but just a place of understanding. Like you kind of need to get it. And on all people get what the drain feels like and get the need to recharge. They just don't understand why that source would recharge that person. Why would you want to be alone that much? Or why would you want to be with people that much? So what do we do with it? Right after we understand it, the needs still exist. The need to recharge from opposite sources sometimes still exists. One of the things is to clarify expectations with your partner. So one of the things that I hear from police spouses, and something that I have felt as a police wife myself, has been that it feels like the officer tries harder with other people to be engaging and to be present than with us. And then they get home and they're just like, you know, they're done. They're down for the count. And that feels a little unfair and it feels a little dismissive, and it can cause some issues. You know, I feel a little taken for granted, a little ignored, those types of things. So one example of like a small expectation might be, you know, it is really helpful to me when you come home if I get like a pleasant, even if it's a fake energetic greeting, unless it's sarcastic. Like, officers beware, being sarcastic about meeting your partner's needs is not okay. That's not going to get you where you're trying to go. It's not funny. You're kind of being an asshole. So if I say, a meaningful greeting is very helpful to me, and then once that expectation of like, hey, he's happy to see me is met, then he can go off and take an hour or whatever to kind of like recharge before he has to engage with the family again. That would be expressing either an expectation or a need or whatever you want to call it. However, if then that officer takes that and comes home and is like, hi, Mariah, I'm so happy to see you. That is not helpful. That is rude. And it's not as funny as you think it is. So that's likely going to discourage me from ever expressing what I actually need again. And that's where resentment can be built up. So avoid the urge to be sarcastic and dismissive. Just really avoid that urge for me if you can. And then very likely in that scenario, in that example where the greeting is what feels really helpful, and then the officer's expectation or need would be after that to have a certain amount of time to not have to pretend they're in a good mood, or not have to come up with things to say or ask questions, because they are asking engaging questions all day, every day, and they drain from it, and that's okay. But the expectation for them might be when I come home, I don't have to pretend. Like I get to be authentic in whatever mood I'm in. So having that conversation, what is the need? What is the unmet need? Or the need in general, the expectation, and how do we fit both? Because there is room for both. There really is. It just takes, first of all, the self-work of identifying what do you need, and then expressing and brainstorming how to kind of make that work. A lot of times there's a pretty simple solution. In external social situations, it might be having a buddy system, like when your cop can't go, or it's not a good idea for them to go because they're completely drained and it's not going to be pleasant. Do you have other people you can go with, and can you find the security within yourself and within your relationship, whether it's a parent relationship, a marriage, a whatever, dating relationship? Can you find the security within yourself and the security within the relationship to say they don't have to come with me to every single thing, and that's okay? And finding someone else to go with, that feels like a good idea to me. Maybe shortening visits so it doesn't have to be so long. Coming up with like a safe word that when the introverted person says this word, that means we need to start wrapping it up. Taking separate cars. There's a million good reasons that I think most of society accepts as to why an officer might need to leave earlier than other people. Sometimes the introvert isn't the cop though. Sometimes the partner or the family member is at specifically police functions where they can feel a little excluded. They don't feel like they quite belong in those conversations because lots of war stories are exchanged and lots of work talk, and it can be hard to stay in that space very long. And so a lot of times, it's not always the cop that needs to leave first, but giving yourself permission to leave at different times can be helpful. Having that word or that like signal if you can tolerate leaving without becoming resentful, can be a good idea. Having a fallback plan. All of your social needs should not be met through your partner. That's never a good idea. All of us are healthier when we have multiple streams feeding us. And so having a tribe is a big deal when you're in the law enforcement family, whether you're the sworn person or not. So that can kind of help equalize the introverted, extroverted needs of people. And it also helps depersonalize it, because that's the other thing people get really stuck on is, I cannot believe I've been talking for 14 minutes, is that they get stuck on, they feel like they're not liked, or they're being rejected, or the person doesn't want to be around them, when it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with charges and drains, and finding access points, regular access points for both. It is not about likability. It is not about interest level. It's not about any of those things. And this becomes a very real ongoing dynamic for people in law enforcement. So it's worth self-evaluating and then having a conversation about how do we better meet everybody's needs, and what meaning are we giving it? How are you interpreting your partner wanting to be around, and I keep saying partner, but it could be family member or whatever, wanting to be around people all the time, because that can make it feel like they never want to be alone with me. and or wanting to be alone a lot, and that feels like they don't want to be with me as well. So either way, we can really misinterpret just this really understandable and completely workable human tendency. So that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully you can find something in there that can help you or someone you know. I may or may not post more. I don't know. I don't feel like I can commit to that right now. So we'll kind of see. However, if you do have a topic that you want discussed, usually, like, I have a pretty small group, I think, watching these, and so you probably have contact information for me. So just let me know. Otherwise, I hope everyone enjoyed their holidays, and we'll talk soon. Bye.